Let me start with a simple question. Have you ever wondered why so many people leave their home country just to work or live somewhere else? From OFWs, refugees to international workers, migration is already part of our daily reality. And today, our topic is all about global migration, how it happens, why it happens, and why it matters in today's globalized world. Before we start, let me share our objectives for this presentation. By the end of the discussion, we aim to first understand what globalization is, identify the facts and reason behind migration, explain how migration is connected to globalization and the nation state, and lastly, discuss how migration affects economies, societies, and national identities. So, basically, after this report, we want everyone to have a clear and realistic understanding of migration. Migration is not a new phenomenon. Even before globalization, people were already moving from one place to another in search of safety, food, and better opportunities. But in today's globalized world, migration has become faster, more common, and more complex. Because of technology, open markets, and global connections, people can now easily cross borders for work, education, or survival. However, migration is not just about people moving. It also affects governments, economies, cultures, and national policies. That's why global migration is an important topic in the contemporary world, because it shows how local lives are deeply connected to global process.
Migration means people moving from one place to another, or moving across boundaries for at least 6 months to 1 year. Types of migration: internal migration, moving within the same country; international migration, moving to another country. Types of international migration: first, immigrant, move permanently to another country. Second, temporary workers, work abroad for a limited time. Third, illegal migrants, move without legal permission. Fourth, family-based migrant, move by family petitions. Lastly, refugees, flee because of war, persecution, or danger.
Now, let's talk about some important facts about global migration. Today, around 247 million people are living outside the country where they were born. This clearly shows that migration is already a very common global situation, not just something that happens to a few people. Next, when we look at the reasons why people migrate, most of them, around 90%, move for economic reasons. This means they are looking for better jobs, higher salary, or a better living conditions. On the other hand, around 10% are refugees or asylum seekers who are forced to leave their country because of war, violence, or unsafe situations. When it comes to more migrants, the top source countries include India, Mexico, China, and Philippines. This means many people from these countries move abroad for work, education, or better opportunities. For us Filipinos, this is very relatable because many OFW work overseas. In terms of where migrants go, the top destinations are United States, Europe, and Middle East. These places attract migrants because there are more job opportunities and higher demand for workers. Lastly, migrants play an important role in the economy. They help fill labor gaps, especially in jobs where are not enough local workers. Because of this, migrants also help increase productivity and support economic growth in their destination countries. So overall, global migration is not just about moving from one country to another. It also affects economies, societies, and people's lives worldwide. Now let's talk about why countries regulate or control migration. Countries usually control migration because of concerns about population, jobs, and culture. Some government worried too many migrants might affect job availability, public services, or even national identity. Because of these concerns, some political leaders push for stricter migration policies. For example, leaders like Donald Trump in the United States and Theresa May in the United Kingdom supported stronger border control and tougher immigration process. However, even if some leaders believe that migration can
Effects on sending countries. Migrants send remittances to support families and economies. Yung mga migrants, ito yung naninirahan ng permanente or hindi naman nagtatagal sa ibang bansa. Ginagawa nila to para makatulong sa pamilya at dahil nga nagpapadala sila ng dollars, makakatulong to sa ekonomiya natin dahil ipapasok sila ng dolyar na ipapalit sa piso. Yan lang yung pinakamadaling explanation. Katulad nga ng sinabi ko kanina, yung remittances, makakatulong to sa pagpapaganda ng buhay pero may kapalit naman yung pagod ng nagtatrabaho sa ibang bansa. Siyempre kaya naman to ginagawa karamihan ng magulang na iibang bansa para sa mga anak nila, para sa edukasyon, para mapagtapos nila sa pag-aaral yung anak nila. Pero yung kapalit neto, nawawalan tayo ng magagaling at mga skilled workers dahil sa baba ng sahod dito sa Pilipinas. Kaya mas pinipili nila ang mag-ibang bansa para mas malaki yung mabigay or masustento sa country. The problem of human trafficking. Human trafficking means forcing people to work or exploiting them. Sa madaling salita, ito yung forced labor na tinatawag. Sa pilitang pagtatrabaho na kahit na hindi naman gusto ng tao or bata. Yung magandang example siguro dito yung mga nanlilimo sa kalye pero parang may sindikato sila. Kasi karamihan sa mga bata na yun, hindi talaga nila gusto or parang pinipilit lang sila kasi wala silang ibang mapuntahan pero kailangan pa rin nilang gawin yun kasi kapag hindi nila ginawa baka mabugbog sila or bugbugin sila ng sindikato na yun. Kahit hindi lang sa Pilipinas laganap yung human trafficking pero sa mga ibang bansa din dahil malaki yung kita dito. Sabi pa nga dito, human trafficking earns about $150 billion yearly for illegal groups. Ito yung mga sindikato or mga masasamang gawain. Ang government and mga ibang NGOs ay nagtatrabaho para mapigilan itong human trafficking pero dahil sa hindi nila alam kung saan yung lead or saan nagsisimula kaya hindi nila masolusyonan ng maayos or wala silang solusyon na government and NGOs ay nagtatrabaho para mapa-stop ito pero dahil na hindi nila alam kung sino yung lead or dahil sa sobrang dami ng mga sindikato na gumagawa nito hindi nila masugpo or hindi nila agad ito.
Integration means how well migrants adjust to their new country, such as how they adapt to the culture, laws, and daily life. Challenges include finding housing and jobs because migrants may face discrimination, lack of connections, or unfamiliar systems. Access to healthcare and education is also a challenge since services may be expensive, limited, or difficult to understand. Language and cultural barrier exist, making communication and social interaction much harder for migrants. Migrants often stay with people from their own country for comfort because shared language and culture make them feel safer and less isolated. Some governments promote integration through language programs and cultural exchanges to help migrants communicate better and understand the local culture. For our conclusion, Migration is a natural process that helps economies grow and societies become diverse. Challenges include brain drain, xenophobia, and integration issues. Rich countries need migrant workers. Poor countries depend on remittances. Migration shows the interconnectedness of the world and the importance of cooperation between nations.
Una sa lahat, how governments shape migration. Most border crossings ay hindi talaga permanent migration. Karamihan dito ay mga tourist, business travelers, students, at short-term workers na pansamantala lang ang stay at babalik din sa kanilang bansa. Dahil dito, gumagawa ang mga bansa ng iba't ibang migration categories para maayos na ma-manage ang mga problema ng mga tao. Halimbawa, sa Australia, may malinaw na categories tulad ng permanent immigrants, long-term temporary migrants which is para sa work, studies at business, at short-term visitors. Ipinapakita nito na ang Australia ay may nation-building approach kung saan hinihikayat ang mga permanent immigration para sa population growth, workforce at economic development. Samantala, sa Germany noong 1960s, mas pinili nila ang temporary migration system sa pamamagitan ng tinatawag na guest worker program. Ang mga workers ay pinapayagang manatili ng seasonal o one-year stay lang dahil inaasahan na ibabalik sila ng kanilang sariling bansa. Pero habang tumatagal, dahil sa pangangailangan ng ekonomiya at social factors, na-extend ang kanilang stay at marami ang nauwi sa multi-year stay at permanent residence. Ano nga ba ang mga categories ng migrante? Una, temporary labor migrants, mga short-term workers sa abroad na nagpapadala ng pera sa pamilya tulad ng OFWs. Pangalawa, highly skilled and business migrants. Ito naman yung mga professionals at negosyante na lumilipat ng bansa para magtrabaho o mag-invest. Pangatlo, irregular undocumented migrants, which is ito naman yung mga migrants na walang legal papers at naghahanap ng trabaho para mabuhay. Pang-apat, refugees. Ito naman yung mga taong tumatakas sa persecution dahil sa lahi, relihiyon o paniniwala. Asylum seekers. Mga taong nag-a-apply pa lang ng refugee status habang tumatakas sa conflict o crisis. Forced migrants, mga taong napilitang umalis dahil sa gera, sakuna o malaking proyekto. Family reunion migrants, mga migrants na sumasama o sumusunod sa kanilang pamilya sa abroad. At panghuli, return migrants, mga migrants na bumabalik sa sariling bansa na may dalang skills, pera at ideas.
People migrate for many reasons, but most of them are looking for a better and safer life. Many people move because of economic reasons, such as finding a job or earning higher wages to support their families. Others migrate to join family members who are already living abroad or to escape danger, such as war, violence, or unfair treatment. Some people move for education, hoping to study abroad and gain new skills that can improve their future. Natural disasters like floods, earthquake, or drought can also force people to leave their homes. It is important to understand that migrants are not always the purest, because migration costs money for travel and documents. Usually, people from middle-income families are able to migrate. When a few people from a community succeed abroad, they often help others follow, creating what we call migration networks, where people support each other in moving and settling in a new country.
Migration has been long driven by population growth, climate change, economic needs, wars, and empire buildings. From the 15th century, European colonialism and industrialization accelerated movements, including European immigration, the first migration of around 15 million African slaves, the later use of indentured workers, and the industrialization caused poverty and landlessness in Europe, pushing mass immigration abroad, while the USA grew through immigration, receiving about 30 million people between 1861 and 1920. Western Europe also relied on migrant workers such as the Irish in Britain, Poles in Germany, and Italians in France. This table basically shows that from 1965 to 1990, people were moving around the world a lot more. The total numbers of migrants jumped from 75.2 million to almost 120, which is a huge glow up for global migration. Developed countries clearly became popular kids, with more migrants choosing to settle there because of better jobs, living conditions, and opportunities. Developing countries still had many migrants, but their share of the global total went down a bit, kind of losing the spotlight. Regions like North America, Europe, and Oceania saw big increases, meaning more people said, "Yeah, I'll stay here." While Asia and Latin America didn't grow as fast, showing that more people were leaving than arriving. Overall, the table shows that by 1990, migration was leaning heavily towards richer regions, followed by opportunities, basically. Migration has grown a lot in the last 50 years, and it affects both the countries people live and the countries they move into. For the home country, migration can sometimes hurt through brain drain when skilled workers leave, but it can also help through remittances, money sent back by migrants, which is very important for national economies. Migrants often face problems like exploitation or weak protection on abroad, especially those from poorer countries. At the same time, labor importing countries benefits from cheap workers, while labor exporting countries rely on remittances. When migrants return home, reintegration can be difficult since many struggle to find stable jobs with better support and opportunities. However, migration can bring a long-term benefits for both sending and receiving countries.
National cooperation on migration. International cooperation is key for managing migration and boosting its positive impact on development. So, bumabagal ito dahil sa kakulangan sa long-term plan ng mga bansa. And immigrants countries are hesitant to raise labor costs for employer by taking more action. Key components ng international regulatory system ay na-establish sa ILO Convention number 97 noong 1949 at number 143 naman noong 1975, as well as the 1990 UN Convention on Migrants' Worker Rights and Ethnic Diversity. Kaya nagkakaganto, alam natin yung ibang mga nagtatrabaho sa abroad, mas pinipili na nilang manirahan doon kapag tumatagal sila dahil nararamdaman nila na mas maayos manirahan at mas maganda yung pagpapatakbo ng gobyerno doon. Pero dito sa topic na to, sa settlement and ethnic diversity, kaya merong naging topic na to kasi tayo mga Pinoy, pupunta tayo sa Amerika, magtatrabaho tayo doon. Tapos pagtapos natin magtrabaho, nagustuhan natin, mag-apply tayo para maging citizen. Dito papasok yon yung magiging permanent ka na doon ka nakatira. Tapos dahil nga hindi tayo pare-pares ng kultura, ng paniniwala, doon magkakaroon ng ethnic diversity. Parang may iba tayo sa kanila. Noong 1960 daw, yung mga Western European policy makers ay naniniwala na dapat yung mga nagtatrabaho lang sa ibang bansa ay dapat hindi manirahan doon. Pero pagdating ng oil crisis, yung mga pamilya nag-unite yung mga pamilya na nandun at doon na nabuo yung ethnic communities. Pinakamadaling para mag-gets nyo agad yung settlement and ethnic diversity, Kunyari, may isang tao, tiga Pilipinas siya, tapos magtatrabaho siya sa ibang bansa. Lumipad siya papunta doon, magtatrabaho siya, umabot siya ng 10 years, tapos napag-isip-isipan niya, gusto
Now, let's talk about migration as a challenge to the nation state. Migration is big part of globalization, and because of that, it can weaken the power of nation states, especially when it comes to border control. Borders are symbols of country sovereignty, so kapag maraming tumatawid or umaalis ng bansa, nagiging challenge ito sa authority ng state. The fact that many people migrate just to have a better life also shows a problem. It highlights the failure of the state to provide enough jobs and economic opportunities for its people. Because of this, some citizens lose trust in their government, which can lead to crisis of confidence. One clear example is the floor contemplation case in 1995, here in the Philippines. When the government failed to protect a Filipino worker abroad, it caused public outrage. This shows how migration can pressure the state, especially when citizens expect protection even outside the country. On the other hand, countries that receive migrants also face problems. Many migration countries struggle to stop unwanted or illegal migration. Even with agreements like the Schengen Agreement and lighter border controls, illegal migration still exists. Some countries respond with strict measures like mass deportations, border fences, harsh punishments for illegal entry, and penalties for employees who hire undocumented workers. But despite these efforts, unauthorized migration is still widespread. Migration is hard to control because it clashes with globalization. Countries open their borders for goods, money, information, tourists, skilled workers. Pero at the same time, they try to limit other types of migrants. These rules are difficult to enforce, which leads to irregular migration, supported by a global migration industry. The traditional nation state is based on the idea that people share the same culture, identity, and background. But migration challenges idea because it creates ethnically diverse populations. Even if democratic countries give citizenship to immigrants, assimilation does not always happen. As a result, new citizens may not fully share the dominant culture. This leads to the rise of multicultural societies, and institutions slowly change to adjust to different values and needs, as explained by Castles and Davidson, year 2000. Countries like the United States or Canada, which have a long history of immigration, adapt more easily because immigration is already part of their national identity. However, countries that strongly value a single culture, like European, Asian, and post-colonial states, find this more challenging. Lastly, modern technology makes migration even more complex. Migrants can now easily stay connected to their home countries through social media, travel, and communication. Because of these transitional communities, the idea of single, homogeneous nation-state becomes harder to maintain. So overall, migration challenges how nation-states control borders, protect citizens, and maintain national identity in a globalized world.
Noong early 1990s, naging main issue ang migration sa international politics dahil sa uncontrolled migration after the collapse of Soviet bloc. Because of this, maraming countries ang nagpatupad ng strict border controls at mas active ang diplomatic actions. By the late 1990s, medyo humupa na yung takot ng Western countries tungkol sa mass migration. Pero in East Asia, migration became a big political issue again during the Asian financial crisis noong 1997 to 1999. During this time, migrants were often blamed for economic problems which led to mass deportation, attempts, and tighter borders, but these efforts have limited success. This shows that successful migration strategy cannot be done by one country alone. Kailangan ng cooperation between labor importing and labor exporting countries. Importing countries benefit because they get needed workers, while exporting countries benefit through remittances, skill transfer, and returning migrants. It's also important to understand na all migration leads to social and cultural change. Kapag pinigilan or inignore ito, it can result in racism, discrimination, and social conflict. Instead, communities should use participatory approaches where both local and migrants are involved para maging positive ang outcome ng changes.
Because of globalization, societies are slowly moving toward diversity and multicultural citizenship. Migration is no longer an exception, it is already part of modern life. These events clearly show that economic and political changes are closely connected to migration. Migration is a natural part of globalization, but sadly, many migration policies are still reactive, meaning ginagawa lang sila kapag may crisis. That's why there is a strong need for an international migration strategy. This strategy should make sure that migration supports economic growth, protects migrants' rights, prevents exploitation, avoids conflict with host communities, and promotes sustainable development. So overall, migration should not be seen as a problem to stop, but as a reality to manage properly in globalized world.
How does globalization as an economic process relate to migration? Globalization as an economic process ay malapit talaga ang connection sa migration kasi pinagdudugtong nito ang economies ng iba't ibang bansa. Habang nag-expand ang mga business globally, may mga countries na mas dumarami ang job opportunities, habang yung iba naman ay nawawalan or kumakaunti ang trabaho. Dahil dito, maraming tao ang nagpupush na umalis sa sariling bansa para maghanap ng mas maayos na trabaho at mas magandang living conditions. Malaking companies also look for cheaper labor at resources sa ibang bansa para mas mababa ang gastos nila. Because of this, mas nagkakaroon ng demand for foreign workers, kaya nahihikayat ang mga tao na mag-migrate. So, habang gumagalaw ang pera, produkto at ang negosyo across borders, kasabay din nito ang paggalaw ng mga tao. Isang magandang example nito ay ang Philippines. Maraming Filipinos ang nagtatrabaho abroad sa healthcare, construction at domestic services. Nangyayari ito kasi dahil sa globalization. Nagbukas ang labor markets ng mga bansa tulad ng Saudi Arabia, Japan at Canada, kung saan mas mataas ang demand for workers. So in short, may push and pull factors talaga. Napupush ang mga tao dahil sa kakulangan ng opportunity sa sariling bansa at napupul naman sila ng mga mas mataas na sweldo at mas stable na trabaho sa ibang bansa.
How globalization as cultural process relate to migration? Ang globalization bilang cultural process ay nangyayari kapag ang mga tao ay palipat-lipat ng bansa. Kaya ang kultura ay hindi na lang nananatili sa isang lugar. Dahil tuloy-tuloy ang paggalaw ng mga tao sa buong mundo, patuloy ding nagbabago at yumayaman ang kultura. Halimbawa, isang Filipino nurse ang lumipat sa UK para magtrabaho sa ospital. Habang nagtatrabaho siya doon, ipinapakita niya yung mga Filipino culture tulad ng pagiging magalang, pagiging marespeto sa mga seniors patients. So ayun, dahil dito, natututo ang kanyang mga katrabaho or yung mga pasyente niya na sa mga Filipino values. So habang nurse naman ay na-adapt din yung mga kultura ng UK tulad ng kanilang work discipline at time management. So by this, naipapakita yung migration kung gaano siya nakakatulong sa pag-miss ng mga culture through globalization.
Globalization as a cultural process relates to migration in various ways. If ethnoscapes were to be executed and people start moving from one country to another, the cultures that they carry may be passed on to several people who carry their own culture on their own country. The movement of people from all around the world is not idle and is growing constantly, so as the culture that we carry. Example, a Filipino teacher migrated from the Philippines to Canada in order to teach preschool learners. Filipino culture such as pagmamano as a sign of respect to their elderly was taught to the children by their Filipino teacher.